I don't know how to begin this without sounding insane. But maybe that's the point. Maybe that's exactly what they want. For weeks now, I've been hearing noises inside my own house. Not the kind you'd blame on old wood or a draft. No, these were deliberate, like something was shifting just beyond the walls. I'd be sitting in my living room late at night and hear the faint scrape of claws against the floorboards upstairs, or the sound of something breathing heavily, as if it were waiting for me to come looking. At first, I told myself I was overtired. I work long hours, and my mind tends to play tricks when exhaustion sets in. But then I started noticing things missing. Small things. A spoon from the kitchen, a pair of socks, even my lighter. Harmless items, but it unsettled me. Because when I finally found them again, they weren't where I'd left them. They were in places I never go, inside the attic, beneath the sink, in the dark corner of the basement I always keep locked. The worst part? The smell. It hit me one morning when I opened the pantry, a sickly, rotten stench like spoiled meat mixed with damp earth. It clung to the air, thick and sour, but only for a moment. By the time I pulled myself together to check, it was gone, like the house had swallowed it whole. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe I've got mice, I told myself, or raccoons or something that crept in from the woods nearby. But that didn't explain what happened next. One night, I woke up to a sound I will never forget. It was the sound of a voice, low, guttural, almost a growl. It was speaking words I didn't understand, but they were too clear, too deliberate to be imagination. I froze in bed, every muscle locked, as the whispering rose and fell from the corner of my room. When I finally gathered the courage to look, I saw 2 red pinpricks glowing in the dark. Eyes, watching me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared, praying I was still dreaming. And then, in the faintest sliver of moonlight, I saw it. A face, twisted, leathery, with a nose so long it curved downward like a hook. The skin was cracked, wrinkled, and stretched too tightly over sharp bones. Its mouth was open in a grin, revealing rows of jagged teeth. It didn't attack. It didn't move closer. It just smiled and whispered something I still can't get out of my head. Beware of goblins at home. The words sank into me like poison, and then it was gone. The eyes blinked out, the shadow melted into the wall, and I was left trembling in my bed, drenched in cold sweat. Since that night, I've stopped sleeping. I keep every light on, every lock bolted, but it doesn't matter. The goblins are here. They've always been here, and I think they're waiting for me to make the wrong move. They don't behave like anything I've read about in books or seen in movies. They are not loud, not blunt instruments of horror. They're patient, precise, small predators that work like termites, gnawing away at the structure of your life until it collapses beneath you. After that first night, things changed from odd to deliberate. The missing items returned with new meanings. My spoon was placed on my pillow like an offering. My socks lay folded at the foot of the stairs, soaked in some dark, oily residue that smelled of iron and earth. Once, I opened the fridge and found a ring of tiny teeth marks around the rim of a yogurt cup, as if whatever lives here had tasted every ordinary thing and found it wanting. They learned from me. They listened to me. I started to hear my own voice in the house, my voice calling from the hallway, whispering urgent things I would never say aloud. "Come see," it said once in my dead aunt's cadence. "It's cold here." It sobbed in the voice of a neighbor who moved away last summer. I ran toward those echoes like a man chasing a light, and every time I found nothing but a smear on the wall, like a small hand sliding across plaster. Sleep became a battlefield. The scratching behind the walls escalated into a slow, methodical tapping, like fingernails tracing a map. Sometimes I would find the wallpaper peeled back a few inches to reveal shallow, dark hollows, pocketed spaces scooped from the studs where something small could hide. I'd block them with duct tape and plaster, and by morning, the tape would be gone. The plaster crumbled into a fine black dust. I called the police once. The officer was patient and polite, his shoes scraping the floor as he walked through the living room. He shrugged when I showed him the spoon on the pillow and the tiny teeth marks. "Rodents," he said, "or vandals. You should get locks changed." He asked if I was under any stress. He suggested medication. He left a business card for a counselor. I felt ridiculous, like I had brought them a ghost with a polite customer service number. Friends stopped answering texts. My sister blocked my calls after I left a frantic voicemail about the sounds in the attic. "You're scaring me," she wrote, short, cold. Her name in my phone turned gray, like a lamp switched off at the source. That cut deeper than any shadow. The cunning thing is how they use what I love to turn me against myself. One night, I found old photographs pulled from boxes, family birthdays, candid shots, faces smiling at some summer light. In the background of every photo, at the very edge of the frame, there was a small shape. First, I thought it was a trick of the light, then a smudge, then a child's toy. But as I looked closer, the shapes resolved into profiles, eyes like coal embers, noses hooked like thorns. They were standing a little too close in every picture, always behind me. I began to notice marks on my skin, tiny crescent scraps along my forearms, like nails dragged gently across the flesh. They bled almost not at all, but the blood smelled old and metallic. Once in the bathroom mirror, as I raised my hand to scrub at a mark, I saw movement behind my reflection, a flicker of a grin that did not belong to me. My reflection blinked, and I hadn't. I started setting traps, bright lights left on, radios blaring static, recording devices strewn on bedside tables. I hoped to catch them, to prove something to myself. The recordings were useless. Hours of hums, creaks, breathing, and then, at the end, a tiny voice, my voice, murmuring, so close the mic must have been inside someone's throat. "We like when you look." The microphone had been shifted, angled upward toward the ceiling. They are not afraid of me. They are amused by me, and they are gathering, small, patient, relentless, where the house is weakest. Tonight I found a trail of crumbs leading to the cellar door, and when I followed it down, there was a ring etched in the damp earth, shallow and black, and in the center a single tiny tooth, yellow as old paper. I am done running in circles. I am going downstairs tonight. I have to know what waits in that ring. The cellar door was colder than the air above it, as if the hinge opened onto a different season. My hands trembled while I turned the knob. The metal felt slick, not from sweat, but a clammy film that smelled like iron and wet stone. I took the flashlight, even though I hated the way its beam chewed through the dark, making everything look smaller and more certain. The deeper I went, the more the house seemed to exhale around me, slow, wet breaths that fogged the flimsy light. The ring was where I left it, a shallow circle gouged into the packed dirt, faint ridges like the grooves of a coffin lid. The tiny tooth lay in the center, dull and chalky against the soil. Around the ring, the earth was pressed flat, as though small hands had sat in a circle, knees drawn up. I could smell them now, closer, a rank sweetness mixed with rotten copper. The smell wrapped around my throat until I swallowed it. I set the flashlight down and crouched at the edge, my face inches from that little tooth. The beam trembled across something else, tiny footprints, so small they looked like the tracks of a child mouse, leading away from the ring toward the far wall. They stopped at a seam in the foundation where the mortar had crumbled, leaving a fissure black and hungry. For a mad second, I considered leaving a note, a warning to myself in the morning when daylight brought sense back. Then I heard the scraping. It wasn't on the other side of the wall. It came from inside the fissure. Something thin was working the gap. Nails, claws, a whisper of bone against stone. I stood up too fast and the flashlight clattered, spinning a slow cone of light that finally fixed on the opening. 2 red pins gleamed in its shadow, reflecting back like false stars. They blinked. I had planned to be brave. I had planned to catch, to record, to force evidence into a world that wanted to call me mad. Those plans evaporated like breath. The thing that eased itself from the crack was smaller than I imagined, but it moved with a human deliberation. It unfolded like a paper puppet, limbs angular and too many joints bristling just beneath ragged skin. Its mouth was a seam of black, and when it smiled, the light hit teeth like knuckle bones. It spoke, not in words, but in the cadence of my own thoughts, drawing things from my memory and airing them like laundry in front of me. My father's laugh, the sound of rain on my roof as a kid, the way my mother used to hum when she cooked. Pleasure colored the cadence, like a child quoting a rhyme it has learned by heart. It crept closer, and for a second I thought I would vomit. The smell intensified, a carnival of rot and sugar and something metallic, and I realized then that the house had never been empty. It had always had an audience, Behind that first, another shifted, then another, until the cellar wasn't a cellar at all, but a theater crowded with faces at the edge of the light. They were different sizes, different ages, in the way a stack of dolls can be older and newer at once. Some had faces like the ones in my photos, always at the edges. Others were younger looking, almost dollish, eyes like pinholes and smiles like the gape of a trap. They didn't rush me. They cocked their heads and observed, cataloging. One, smaller than the rest, poked a finger toward me. It was a single, precise motion, like the tap of a conductor. Where its nail touched the dirt, a tiny hollow opened, and from it a thin, high-keening rose, harmonizing into a chorus that made the hairs on my forearms stand like rows of knives. The sound was a kind of voting. A name was being chosen. I tried to move, to back away, but my feet were numb, like the cellar had been poured around them. The nearest one reached up and brushed a mark on my forearm, the crescent scratches I had been scrubbing at for days. It pressed its face close to mine, so close I could see the fine dust trapped in the grooves of its teeth. It whispered something soft, and for the first time I understood the tone. Not hunger, not malevolence only, but a patient triumph. Ownership. If you go, it said in my voice, we come in. The laughter that followed wasn't laughter. It was the sound of joints clicking back into place and the slow rustle of many small bodies rearranging themselves for a feast. I understood then what they meant by at home. Home to them was not a roof and a bed. Home was a doorway left unlocked, my weakness, my habit, my late-night walk to the kitchen. They had lived in my margins, my corners, until they knew the exact place to press and the exact word to mimic. I felt them slip into me first as a pressure behind my eyes, a crawling warmth under the skin, like someone laying tiny hot stones along my spine. Then a whisper nested in my throat, an accent that wasn't mine but sounded like it had brushed my mouth 1,000 times. They were not entering only the house. I do not remember the fall. I remember instead the ascending, light, the rush of air, the quiet of a grin forming where my lips should be. When I look in the mirror now, I catch reflections of those tiny teeth in the corners of my smile. Sometimes at night, I hear my own voice calling from the hallway, patient and precise. I used to be the one who warned people. Now I warn myself when the lights go out. Beware.
Subscribe to Horror Story Bar.